Hi, Carlos. Jeff Allen here. Just I want to address the post you made a couple days ago, or actually one day ago, on reading and writing. And I'm going to read it here, and then I'd like to comment on it. And I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm a trained linguist in the sense that I did bachelor's degrees in French linguistics and literature, but French linguistics, so phonetics. And I did master's degree in both applied linguistics and in theoretical linguistics with phonology and syntax and semantics. And then I did my doctoral work on loan words and phonology and semantics between languages. So and I'm a dialectologist too. So I worked in dialectology. So, and this was all before I started getting into translation into language teaching. Well, I did language teaching to actually pay for that, right? So, but so I'm coming from this from not just I'm gonna say that I'm gonna make a distinction here between prescriptive linguistics, which is you tell people what they should do, okay, how they should speak, how they should write. That's called prescriptive linguistics in general. And then there's descriptive linguistics. And I'm a sociolinguist. I look at what people do, analyze that, and say, well, this is how they're doing it, right? And things can change. I see that things can evolve and change because even I'll just want to give one example here that I mean the very thing right now you hear a lot of people saying, "What's your ask? What's your ask?" And for me that sounds weird in English, right? But but I hear people saying this all the time. It's what is your request, right? And but I'm not but I'm a descriptive linguist. I'll say even that even shocks me. Okay, but I don't say it, but I accept it because there's enough people saying it in a professional setting. What you're asked, well, I'm not going to sit there and correct them because I understand what they're saying, right? So I'm a sociolinguist in that sense. I will accept it if I understand what it is. Um, Now, I won't teach that, but I'll teach the example that that's what people say. I'll use this in classes or courses or in videos or whatever, but I won't say that naturally. Okay, so that's why I want to make a distinction between prescriptive linguistics and descriptive linguistics. Because I'm first I went out and was taught how to go and work on languages that don't have a writing system, and then you go figure it out and let sounds, and then you create a writing system. So it, for me, speaking is the first thing. So I want to say that prescriptive versus descriptive is really clear. And I want to make a distinction between reading and writing, and and I want to make another distinction here. Reading and writing are two different things. Reading, writing, speaking and writing, and speaking and reading are different things. And then speaking is the only native language of mother tongue in anyone. Okay, reading and writing are learned skills. They're not language, native language. They're learned skills that we do in school usually. Okay, and then they're reinforced at home and with friends, but they're learned skills. They are not naturally acquired things. Okay, I want to make that distinction too. And I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to make some theoretical, very foundational things for your thing, post here. And I want to try to get at what your post is trying to say. I don't want to say you're wrong. I just want to maybe position it in a way that where it belongs in the spectrum of all these things. And I want to make a distinction also between first language acquisition and second language acquisition. First language acquisition is a language you learn at home first, speaking. Then you maybe learn to read and write it, right, at school. And then there's second language acquisition. We learn another language by speaking and or reading and writing. And most people, adults, tend to learn a second language by reading and writing more than speaking, right? Because we know how to read already, right? In principle. Now, and there are lots of cultures where the second language you learn just by speaking because it's a trade language, right? The majority of people in the world learn a second language by trade languages by not reading and writing. So I want to make all these different distinctions because I think that they clarify kind of the context and where this is. I'm sorry it took 4.5 minutes to kind of explain this, but I think this is really important for your post because your post is taking a prescriptive linguistic thing, which is not bad. Okay, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I want to position it because I'm a descriptive linguist, right? I'm also a prescriptive linguist. I've taught languages, but and I do make translation system things where you got to be prescriptive in some ways, right? You can't always, you got to be descriptive, but sometimes you have to be prescriptive in some things. So I want to make all these distinctions here that I just made uh, because they're really important. So prescriptive versus descriptive. There's a difference between first and second language acquisition. There's a difference between speaking and reading versus writing. And then there are, these different things. And you've already kind of made these here, but I want to make them clear. So let me read the post, and I want to comment on it. Okay, so you learn to read by you learn to write by reading. You learn to write properly by writing poorly until you refine your style as you practice. Then you learn to speak by listening. Then you learn to speak properly by reading. To speak properly, you learn by trial and error until, after a ton of practice, you start getting better at it. It is a never ending process, a fascinating, deeply enjoyable process, though. We are not born with that kind of knowledge. Practice. There are a lot of great things in here, okay, and there's a lot of truth here. But I want to point out the things that I totally get. That practice, tons of practice. I totally agree. Um, but I want to point out the things that from a language of the majority of people in the world that do not learn to read and write, and those and the ways of learning how you may learn to read and write. You may learn another language not by reading and writing. Okay, a second language acquisition. So I want to cover those here, and I want to discuss the word properly because you said the word properly and a couple times. And again, I'm not trying to degrade or anything because I think there are some great things, but I think there are some the things that you've got a certain point of view which isn't the point of view that is done for descriptive linguistics in general. Okay, it's more prescriptive. I'm not saying it's bad again. Okay, I want to point it out. Okay, because there's these are not absolutes. I think that's really important to understand. Very relative to your framework of how you're positioning. Okay, so you learn to write by reading. Not necessarily. You can learn to write not by reading. You learn to use it with the skills of reading, but you don't necessarily by reading. You learn to do it with characters that are written on that are writable and readable. Right? I can write some languages better than I can read them. Okay, just because I don't know certain vocabulary items, and I'm not really great at reading them fluently, but I can write them enough to get by some of them. Okay, just that small point. I want to skip over the next point here. Well, I'll do it. You learn to write properly by writing poorly until you refine your style as you practice. And there's in second language teaching and stuff, a lot of teachers actually see a lot of stuff that's incorrect, and then they actually influences their own writing style and how they teach, right? But I want to see the word properly to write properly. Properly does not exist. Okay, the idea of properness in linguistics does not exist. Now you do have in when you have evaluation of statements in linguistics in any type of theoretical linguistics is general linguistics. You've got a thing called agrammatical. So is the statement grammatical or agrammatical? An agrammatical is an exclamation point, right? And that means it's completely wrong. Okay, it's just wrong. It's just something you wouldn't say. Um, um, we eated this. Okay, that's something I can't say. You can't say it's just wrong. So we eated the food would be an exclamation point. Okay. Then there's one called kind of it's a question mark, and the question mark is usually it's understandable. I get the idea, but I wouldn't say that as a native speaker. Okay, and whatever you want by native speaker, I know the word native right now is kind of a known term on mother tongue speaker, and a mother tongue speaker is another no-no, right? So I'm just trying to say your tongue that you learned, as a speaker of that language, right? So I'm going to distinguish between agrammatical, which is completely incorrect, and then question mark is it's understandable, but okay. So this whole writing properly doesn't exist in the sense that properly is an idea of prescriptive. That there's a difference of properness, which doesn't exist in linguistics. I'm saying general linguistics and syntax, phonology. It's all about approximation. It's about approximation. I got a whole video. I got videos on this about approximation on this. It's in one of my video series here. But properness or being proper stuff, it comes from usually from grammatical language teachers usually, okay? Grammar police, what do you want to call folks? And I'm not saying bad. I'm saying grammar police are actually good sometimes, right? So I'm not saying it's always bad, but the idea of writing properly or poorly actually doesn't exist in if you get your message across in descriptive linguistics, it's okay. If the message bought you the food or got you the food in a trade language, hey. Or if you spoke it and it got you the food, that's all that matters, right? It doesn't matter how approximate and close it is to a native speaker or not. You know, I'm trying to use the word. I'm sorry, the native speaker is the word, so I got to say that word because I don't have another word for it right now. Um, so, so writing properly and writing poorly doesn't exist in general linguistics. Now, it does in language teaching. Okay, so now I want to say in translation, you can kind of creative content writing and say the same thing, right? So I want to state here. I want to be careful. I'm not trying to throw it out, okay, because I think that's important here. But I think now you said to learn to speak by listening. Yes, you learn to speak by listening. That's how all, again, native speakers do it, and actually non-native speakers in second language acquisition situations do learn to speak by listening. They need to listen first. Well, it helps to listen a lot. Now, not all people. There are different people that have different language learning styles, and that's where you have to get in. Those are the oral, the speaking, they're listening. Some that are visual, some that are more, that. Plus, if you're kind of introvert and extrovert, that kind of happens is people that are more extrovert will make all the mistakes they don't care. People that are introvert, they'll be thinking about the sentences in their head until they finally get out one sentence. But by the time that gets out, the food's already gone, right? You can't buy it. So, but to learn to speak by listening, um, there's a lot of truth in that. Okay. Then you learn to speak properly by reading. Now, I'm going to say no, 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 no. Now, from a descriptive linguistics point of view, from just spoken content, right? Um, native learners, right? I'm talking native learners. Now, we got to see, I think you're coming from a second language acquisition point of view, which I think is really important in this whole thing, right? I'm coming from a first language point of view, first language acquisition, at least in this. But we apply the second language acquisition, that's a whole different ballgame, right? So, from a first language acquisition point of view, you learn to speak properly by reading? No. You learn to speak properly by listening and speaking, listening, speaking, listening, speaking, listening, speaking, and being corrected by your parents or your friends. Well, usually your parents and your teachers, right? You do not learn to speak properly by reading because reading is a derivative. Reading and writing are a derivative of natural language, which is spoken language and is always spoken language and always will be spoken language. Because native language, again, reading, writing is a derivative, something it's a learned skill. It's not language, it's a learned skill. Some get better at it, some don't, okay? Um, so I think this is really important for first language acquisition. Again, I'm very specific about this. And I'll come back to the second language point of view, okay? Then to speak properly. Again, speaking properly. Why do I do video books, okay? I do video books because no one can critique my videos by speaking. Uh, if I say, oh, here and there, okay, people say, oh, yeah. But I'm speaking extemporaneously. I'm doing what we always do. Everybody does this. And no one stops to go, oh, you're stealing filler words because I'm thinking about what I'm talking about. This is what people do naturally. Now, people will correct that and say, well, you should be doing because I don't have a script. People that speak natural language don't do scripts in their heads. They're just speaking, right? Just like I'm doing now. So I have no us and all that, right? Until I start thinking about something and I'm trying to find the word I'm trying to think about, right? Then I'll say or whatever or hmm. All right. So to speak properly, you learn by trial and error. Now, yeah, but again, properly, I want to be very careful. What does properly mean? Properly is an approximation word. Again, see my video about approximation, about semantics and prototype semantics. That's a really important one. But so yes, you do learn to speak. I'm not going to say properly. You learn to speak by learning by trial and error. And I'm taking first language acquisition, kids, okay, kids. Until after 10th practice, you start getting better at it. Well, no, it's not as a kid, you don't start getting better at it. You do it. Now, your parents will correct you, okay? They'll say, you can't say we eated, say we ate, okay? They'll correct you, right? Now, there's no reason why you can't say we eat it, because we eat it actually it should be the form, but there are some very common words. The most common words I use in a language, I'll call them vague verbs, most common verbs, they're irregular, very irregular. So they become so irregular over time, whereas a lot of other verbs, they're regular verbs. They're usually categories of them. But the most used ones, eating, make, do, have, be, take, eat, eat sometimes not, but these are very commonly used verbs, so they're the ones that are most irregular because they evolve the most because they're so used. Okay? This is a typical thing in a lot of languages. So to speak properly, you learn by trial and error. No, just to speak, you learn it by trial and error. And after a lot of practice, you end up doing it. Okay? I'm not saying you're getting better at it. You're by being by being approached and told to change things, you get better at it. But it's not you getting better at it. You're just doing it closer, more approximately to what the adults say is grammatical, okay, and not agrammatical. See, this is that grammatical and grammatical, agrammatical. The exclamation point comes into place. That's what a native speaker would say, not what could be understood, okay, because things can be understood even. And then it's a not never-ending process. Yes, it is forever. Both native speaker and first language acquisition and second language acquisition. It's always a never-ending process. It's fascinating, yes. Deeply enjoyable, yes. I totally agree. And we are not born with that kind of knowledge. Totally agree. Totally agree. And practice. You always got to practice. You got to practice whatever, right? And I've had it where I've had a aphoria where I've actually lost my native language skills because I was speaking the second language so much and writing it so much that I kind of lost the first language stuff that's happened. So I want to come back now. That's my first language point of view. Yes, it's taken 15 minutes already, right? But I think this is really important because these are concepts that we need to make sure we say what is our point of view and from where we're coming from to make statements. So now if I take it from a second language point of view, so a second language point of view, if I'm learning another language, and I could be speaking or reading, right? Because we do both. So it kind of depends on who we are, right? So I can now break this down. If I was learning a language in Africa, um, some trade language like Lingala or Kiswahili, okay? Um, and there isn't a lot of chances to read and write it, right? Yeah, a little bit. You got some chances, but there's not a whole lot of chance to read and write it. And there are other languages that we don't even have a chance. It's all trade language stuff. It's trade language, right? So they're used for communicating across cultures. When you got to buy food, you got to buy some fish, right, on the lake. Um, so between languages that have geographical distances and have different barriers, physical barriers, it's dialectology. So you learn to write by reading. If you have the chance to have to read and write to be able to do your trading and stuff, both. I mean, you learn by doing it again, not necessarily by reading, but the skills are similar, right? You learn to write properly by writing. No, you just practice. I mean, and there's no writing action in these languages. So there's not there. You can write, but there's no, other people. Most people can't write them, so it doesn't matter. So you learn to write by reading doesn't apply. You learn to write properly by writing poorly doesn't apply because trade language and stuff. I mean, you can read and write them, but most people don't. They can't. You learn to speak by listening. Yes, yes. For second language acquisition, trade language context. And then you learn to speak by properly reading. Wrong. No, 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 no. Can't because you don't. You're not reading. You're speaking. You're speaking. You're speaking. Yeah, you're just speaking. Everything's about spoken and just practicing it, right? To speak properly, you want to learn by trial and error. Of course, yes. So in a second language acquisition, trade language context, yes, totally great. It's never ending process there. Now let's come back to now from a second language acquisition thing in a context where we're going to school, kind of did they learn another language, and they have to make a distinction between those that learn it as a school because they haven't learned to read and write in their second language, okay, or their first language. Children, in Africa or in South America, okay, they learn another language that is an official language, but they don't learn to read and write in their own native tongue that they've actually spoken for a few years. So, to take that point of view, the, uh, this is how it written from that point of view. So, second language acquisition, reading, writing, but in a language that you don't speak yet, you're learning to read and write it at school, but it's not the same language as you haven't learned to read and write in your own native language, okay? That you spoke it. Okay? I take this point of view now. So you learn to write by reading, yeah, because that's at school, right? That's the only thing. You learn to write properly by writing poorly. Yeah, because there will be lots of teachers tell you wrong, so that happens in that context. Yes, because it's a reading and writing situation. You learn to speak by listening. Yeah, because that's they're going to be forcing you to only speak in that language, maybe Spanish in a lot of Southern American countries, South American countries, or Central America. I'm talking about languages where people speak Quechua, right, or some language that's their native language, right? Um, then you learn to speak properly by reading. Um, yeah, kind of, because you're forced to read and write all day long, right? And then you have to speak properly. You got to speak, and you're told how to speak based on what you read and write. So in a second, that specific context, yes. To speak properly, you learn by trial and error, and to obviously practice, yeah. And that's how most people in a lot of languages, even like again, South America or a lot of francophone and anglophone and lusophone countries in Africa, this is how it works, right? And never-ending process, believe it. Now let's take another point of view, which is the point of view of adults that have already learned. They have a native language that is spoken, spoken in. They learn to read and write it at school. Then they learn another language to go do tourism things, right? So this is the other kind of context of second language acquisition, where you're learning it either speaking and or reading writing, right? But you're in a kind of a training program, a language training program, or whatever. So there are lots of opportunities. And here we could even distinguish. We could break it off down to those that learn to only go and just kind of go adventure and kind of do backpacking. Packing. You're not going to read and write, right? So, but you're going to just learn to hear by listening, right? So I could break them down. You can see I could go down that. But let's take it to the extreme, which is again, you native language, you speak it, you learn to read and write it. Now you're an adult, and now you're learning to read and write it for business purposes or whatever. So you get these classes and stuff. Now let's take this point of view, and I think this is the one you're actually getting at. You learn to write by reading, yeah, and maybe speaking too, right? You learn to write properly by writing poorly until you refine. Yeah, definitely, because this is where a lot of this happens, right? And I'm seeing adults to be teenager level too. So, and then you learn to speak by listening. Yes, in language teaching classes. Yes, you learn to speak properly by reading. Can be, it does apply. It's a mixture, but you speak properly because usually in language teaching, people can tell you what they consider is right or wrong, right? And their goal, a lot of language teachers actually correct you all the time, right? Which is not always good. Um, then to speak properly, you learn by trial and error. Totally practice, yes, totally, and then never ending process. So I'm totally good. Um, now I'll give an example here. I'm already at 23 minutes, right? But I think this is really important. I think this is because we get a lot of statements of prescriptive linguistics out in the internet where the point of view from descriptive linguistics isn't there, and then the distinction between first and second language usually isn't included, and so it's kind of a very, very specific point of view where there are these different other angles depending what angle you're coming at. So, um, the just an example, a few months ago, I've been living. I've spoken French for 40 years. Okay, and I came to France. I came to France. I already had a bachelor's degree in French linguistics, and I already spoke French. Right, it was my second bachelor's degree. I already spoke it. I listened to cassettes all the time. I already had been tested. I can't remember the level, but I already had a pretty good level, a very good level of, and I had taken a second bachelor's in 1 year, and I took all the literature classes and the linguistics classes. And we were speaking French pretty much all day long for an entire year, right? So, and I did an immersion thing too for 1 full month, just French all month long. Okay, this was a year before I came to France, a year and a half, 2 years before I came to France. Then I came to France. I could speak pretty fluently, okay? But of course, the domain, the field, I could speak all the stuff in the literature was no problem. All the stuff in regular basic stuff. Then you get into comic books, okay, and all that. That's where it's a little bit different, right? So, and there were a lot of. I worked as a youth counselor at a camp, and the first summer, this is 1989, the year that Berlin Wall came down, and so I worked in summer camp. Well, I learned a lot of vocabulary that night. When little kids, small kids, so all these kids were falling off their beds at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? You learn different vocabulary in that context than you do learning literature, right? There are a lot of swear words and a lot of stuff, and you learn a lot of doing words, right? When you're working in summer camps with kids. And then I went to teach in school for a year, And I came back, and then I did my master's and my doctoral work, and had lots of friends and colleagues. So that's a whole living experience. That's totally different than just studying books, right? But fast forward, now I've got doctoral work and stuff, and I chose who my directors would be. And so I just recently, 30 years later, literally 30 years later, I went to go visit some of the people that were all my professors from 30 years ago, and those that I didn't choose as I finally chose to not be my doctoral thesis advisor, um, because I'd selected a third one. They said go to work the other guy. Okay, and so, but I happened to work with them a lot more over time, over the past 3 decades. And so I went to visit them. And the funny thing was, when I was, and I've been here 30 years. I got married to a French girl. I have spoken French at home in the United States when I took her to the States and lived there for 4 years. So my kids have grown up in France, French spoken at home, but I speak to my kids in English, right? But French is the home has always been the language spoken at home in the family. But when I'm talking to kids, I speak in English. So and my wife, she lived in the States 4 years. She knows English well enough to understand everything, right? So it didn't matter. We just kind of did everything one parent, one language thing, right? Not writing, because one of my sons is dyslexic, so we didn't want to mix that into the thing, right? So the kids just grew up learning French. What is funny was I going out to meeting on this trip to go visit all these professors. 30 years later, go thank them and stuff for helping me in linguistics and all that, giving dinners and stuff, and talking with them, and talking about our experiences over the past 3 decades. One of the professors that was one of the guys who was making the thesis directive, we're talking, and like every sentence he'd stop me, right, and try to correct me, and little things like I would say little things. He'd try to correct it. I said, I've been saying this for 33 years and everybody understands what I'm saying. And he says, but no, that's not correct. And speaking wise, right? A very small phonetic difference. And then I'll turn to people in the other room and I say, hey, I said this. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, of course. I said, they understand what I'm saying. But because he's used to wanting to correct people, he'd correct me. And I'm talking, every sentence, right? And I've been living here for 33 years. And I've spoken French at home a lot. And and so he says, well, he said to me, he says, it's really important because if you correct these small little details, you'll be understood more. Now, he was actually in kind of the provinces areas in France, that not the Paris area. I'm from Paris, right? So Paris, we walk fast, we talk fast, everything, right? Because you got to get stuff done and you got to be busy. I mean, you go in the subway system, people walk fast. Go walking in these towns that are outside of Paris, way out, and they're all walking slowly. So he's telling me to speak slowly, right? Because the people are walking slowly, right? And 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 I said, you know what? People understand what I say. And he says, but if you correct this, and I said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because everyone else understands. And if they don't, then they tell me they don't understand. They frown or something, and I understand what they don't understand. But everyone understands because they actually respond to me, right? If people respond to what I'm saying, it doesn't matter. He says, well, Jeff, you got to change your accent. I said, no, I don't have to change my accent. I'm fine with my accent. I speak English all day long. That's my job is, right? My job is to work in international projects. And yes, I speak French fluently, and it doesn't matter. Um, but so the whole goal, and I'm a linguist, a phonetician, so I can actually change my accent. I can make it sound French. I can do this all the time. I do this to people, and it just like flips them out. They say, where am I from? And I say, well, I say from this region, and they say, no, you're not. You get an accent. And then I change my accent. I change my accent because I speak French without an accent, because I work on it, right? I can change it. I know how to do this, right? I know how to change the accent placement. I know how to change things by not just speaking naturally, just French, right? And and it flips them out. It just freaks people out. And I said, yeah, I'm a spy, right? Just like Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible and Black Widow and James Bond. I can do this, right? And they all laugh. And they said, really, really come, and I'll change my accent back to my natural, you know, just speaking French with I don't care about my articulatory patterns and stuff from now, right? I'm not caring about accent. I'll say, yeah, it's my fault. Parents' fault. I was American passport, right? And they all laugh, but they all understand what I'm saying, right? So changing the accent doesn't matter, right? It doesn't really matter because it gets my stuff right. So I've got people playing here. They're going to be on me by another restaurant here in the morning, Sunday morning, but So I want to say it's great what you're writing, okay? And I want to say that it's wrong everywhere. I'm saying that depending on which angle you're taking and what you're trying to present from these different points of view that I did all mention, I don't want to repeat like 20 times. It depends, right? And so in one case it'll apply all, and then one case it'll apply partially, and in another partially in different ways. But from a completely descriptive point of view, which I think Michael Reed is saying here, does this imply that speakers of pre-literate language can't learn to speak their own language properly? That's why you get the people cleaning here and the opposite, they're walking by here. Um, um, they're actually cleaning while people are in the restaurant. They didn't do it during the night, right? Um, so. I think that Mike is pointing at what I'm trying to get at, right? That there are some contexts where one of these angles where it doesn't apply, and then you've got a different angle you're trying to present, and so again, I just want to it's kind of get it here. I think what you're coming at is you're coming from a point of view of second language acquisition, adults learning to read and write and speak in a context where they're trying to learn the language, but they already have the speaking skills in their native language. They already have their reading and writing skills down in their native language, and now they're going to try to learn one for tourism and business basically, and for professional things and whatever. But they're not going off and just kind of doing the venture and kind of speaking and not caring about the reading writing because it doesn't really matter, right? It's like a backpacking adventure for 3 months in Europe or that kind of stuff. The reading writing doesn't really matter. It's just speaking, going to getting your food at the bakery stuff, right? That'd be a different context. So, just want to, hey, great post, okay? I just want to, I want to address these points because I think all these things from a linguistics point of view, from general linguistics, are really important. And language learning and language acquisition are not the only type of aspect of linguistics and why you go reading right. There are a lot of sociolinguistic factors here, and I think it all comes down to sociolinguistics, right? Different socioeconomic patterns, straits, um, uh, hierarchies of where you're doing things, why you're learning things, and all that. That's it. Sorry it took over 30 minutes, but I think this is a really key thing, and this is fitting into my one of books um, on my one of my books I'm doing on language learning, right? In linguistics, or to my series about general linguistics too, and languages. So I think this fits perfectly into that playlist of my video series. But hey, thanks for the post. This is great. I love addressing these things. These are things that make. But we love talking about languages, right? This is what we love talking about, and we can debate this all day long. And it's all debated because there's no ready answer to all this. It's just I get your message across, and uh, and it doesn't matter how, right? Sometimes you can deal with all kinds of so-called mistakes or misapproximations. But if you buy your food, hey, I can go to Germany. I can. I don't write. I don't read it very great. I can write it a bit. I don't read it very well, but I can speak it to get my food, right? And to find the toilets, find the train, find the bus, find that, buy my ticket, and all that. But the rest, yeah, uh, I got to spin there a lot. My meetings can't go to meetings, right? Can't go to meetings in German because my German's too high enough to do that. And I don't have it. The problem too is I go when I went to Germany last time. I have to speak in English with my colleagues because the stuff we got to talk about is needs so much intense and vocabulary. I don't have that vocabulary to be able to do it, and they don't have the time to allow me to learn that vocabulary to get to the point where we need to talk about it, right? So these are all these sociolinguistic factors to pull into it. Again, thanks for the post. Looking for all your comments. And sorry this is long, but hey, this is kind of thing. There are you had a lot of great points I had to break down into different categories and say how do we even analyze this. Thanks so much. Take care.